Now the house that I'm getting ready to show you was built in the late 1700s. It was a log cabin. Blackwater got up, flooded it. The logs come apart, floated down Blackwater.
Oh, wow.
They went and gathered the logs back, made out of old American chestnut, which is now extinct.
Yep.
And they built this house back in about 1910 or 20. Jay Keaton, connection to the Bigfoot situation, is living on this farm here, the Blackwater Farm in Wellington, Kentucky. The reality of this creature interacting with me and my family over many, many years. So right here, there was one of the first things that I noticed that was very, very odd, that got us in contact with the BFRO here, the Kentucky BFRO, was there was a pine tree that was located just almost where I was standing at right here. It was about 8 to 10 inches in the main trunk stem. It come up at roughly about 8 feet, and it was snapped off and was laying about 30 feet that way, the top, still connected. But right here in the middle of nowhere, there was a deer head jammed down onto the break. So where the tree had been snapped, it was about like this, and the deer head was jammed, I mean literally jammed down, like somebody stood above it and pushed it down. A little basket rack 8-point buck right here. I got on my hands and knees and tried to track whatever it was to see if I found any kind of indentions, any kind of a footprint, any kind of hair on the tree. No claw marks, no climbing, no hair. Something brought it here. The animal was not killed here. It was not drugged here. The head looked like it had been twisted off. It wasn't like a cut, but it looked like it had been broke off and was jammed down in the break right here, actually right here. And there's a break in the cliffs that goes back behind me to my right, facing this way, and there was a huge trail going through here. And so I was looking at this just to see how the deer was moving when I noticed the deer head in the tree, jammed in the tree right here.
Jay Keaton's family has been in Morgan County, Kentucky since the 1700s, owning this particular piece of ground for almost 50 years. His family is only the second to possess this property, with the first family being awarded it as payment for fighting in the Revolutionary War.
And I was always the big kid, so I couldn't fit underneath of there. And Jeff said, I'm gonna go in there and explore that. I can tell that's a big cave. He goes in with a flashlight, and I was probably 10 at the time. He was probably about 14. And I hear him from way back underneath the rocks, the formation. Oh my gosh, he says. He goes, it's a cavern in here. And he lifts up a big piece of slab about this big, about that wide and about that thick, and there's a human skeleton underneath of it. In which we turned in, which we knew what it was, so. And it became that, it was a native grave. Hey, hey, this is a great amphitheater, and this was a place that they would meet. The chief would sit there, and the people would be gathered around the edges of this, and you can hear anybody talk all the way around through here.
With strong ties to this region, Jay is both Shawnee and Catawba, being very active in his heritage by speaking the Shawnee language, drumming and singing traditional songs, and living in a native way, which is to say Jay and his family are very connected to the land.
Waga, Habing, Michigan, and Blada me kamawaga, Oni Dijima, Shegamanis Naga, Ponun and Dema, Kijimana Tukochitbe. It's a great place to camp. It's soft here. You got the wintergreen. Those are wild blueberries. which all the animals tear up.
On roughly 1,000 acres, his property is not only massive, but also has no shortage of geographic diversity within its boundaries. There are roughly 6 miles of cliff lines. The property is scattered with remnants of old homesteads and roadways no longer used. There are many rock houses and caves present as well. It's also home to 2 main waterways, the Blackwater Creek that flows into the Licking River, and the Baldwin Creek that flows into Blackwater. Activities started on this property between 20 and 25 years ago.
Okay, so this has been a good 20 years ago or so. There was a man here that wanted to hunt here, and there is 6 or so, 7 miles worth of cliffs on this property, and some very, very rugged and remote areas where the caves and things exist. And he wanted to hunt down there. It's very difficult to get to. It's a rugged landscape, and he wanted to bring his camper in up near the cemetery, and he wanted to camp up there, but the night before deer season, he was going to go and hike down into the cliffs and hammock camp closer to where his tree stand was at. So they didn't have such a far walk in the morning of opening day of deer season, which is, like I was telling you, kind of a sacred day to those of us who love to deer hunt. It's a very jovial time. Everybody's geared up, ready, excited for the hunt that's going to follow in the morning. Well, my dad comes in off of the porch. I had come down from Ohio. I hadn't retired yet. My dad was a very matter-of-fact man, Native American man. He had a cup of coffee in his hand. We were all on the inside. TV was going. We couldn't hear what was going on the outside. It was getting near dark, and he says to me in a very matter-of-fact way, "Did you just hear that?" And I looked at my brothers. My brothers looked at me and said, "Hear what?" He goes, "You all didn't hear that." And very forcefully he was, and was not joking. I said, "No, Dad, I didn't hear it." He goes, "It shook the windows of this house and you didn't hear it." "No, we didn't hear it." I said, "What was it?" And he looked at me and he said something that I'll never forget, because we've hunted all over the eastern side of the United States. Those moose horns that's back behind you, they are ones that my dad shot in Canada. We're very acclimated to the woods. And he looks at me and he says, "I don't know what it was." And when he said that, instantaneously the room went quiet. We all looked at each other and says, as if to say, there's nothing that Dad doesn't know about the woods. And so he was very concerned about the man that was hunting up from us with the sound that he heard. I asked him what it was. He says to me, he goes, if I had to describe it, he said it sounded like a man, but an animal, as well as a man. I said, "Make the sound." And he did this funny face, and he said it just let out a roar, and then it turned animalistic. And he said, he goes, "Whatever made this sound had a massive set of lungs." He goes, "This animal had to have been a mile away down in the holler down in here." And he said it shook the windows of the house. And he goes, "We need to go and check on this man and make sure he's okay." So we did that. We jumped on the ATVs. It was now nighttime. It was the night before deer season. It was mid-November, which is when we see a lot of activity around here. And as we approach the camper, it's a little different than what my dad has said before. And I think maybe just to protect certain folks, but I'm going to tell you now that these people are all gone. He had kept himself in the camper and had barricaded himself in his camper after he heard this noise. And when we knocked on the door, he opened up the door to us and asked us if we had heard this. And my dad said, "That's why we're down here. We're checking on you." He said, "I'm a combat veteran." He goes, "I'd fight any man." He goes, "I've been in places all around the globe." He said, "But there is no way I'm staying here." He goes, "Whatever's in the woods," he goes, "I'm not dealing with that." And he left as we stood there the night before deer season.
What if there is another world right under our feet? Depending where one stands, that can be more or less true in North America, which is home to the world's longest known cave system, Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. Formed from limestone, Mammoth Cave measures an astonishing 400 miles in length, with portions yet to be explored. Most regions of the Heartland are peppered with caves of one form or another, even if not on the same dramatic scale as Mammoth Cave. But when one considers that caves can support their own unique ecosystems, and that humanity has added to subterranean spaces in the form of mines, it begs the question of what could be down there that normally goes unnoticed. More pointedly, could a species like Sasquatch use caves as shelter, if not a means of concealment?
There aren't a lot of caves in Michigan, and that's a shame because they'd be so fun to play in. But when I was a child, certainly not as an adult, but there are some up in the UP, and then there was one very small cave system near Hillsdale, Michigan, and it's the Doty Caves. And it was named after, I'm going to make up a name, Silas Doty, who was a horse thief. And in 1866, he got out of prison and he hid a real live full-size horse in a cave that was found near the Irish Hills area of Hillsdale, Michigan. And so there's a real live cave system there. I've never had the opportunity to go there. I do know that at the time they tried to shut it down so that it wasn't as big because they were actually afraid of the guy and they didn't want him to come and rustle any more horses there and hide them. But that is a cave that is large enough actually to go into. And it's right now, it's really the only one that I 100% know about in the Lower Peninsula.
The Lower Peninsula is a lot of sand, right? It's surrounded by all sorts of water. Up in the Upper Peninsula, there are probably some caves. I don't know to what extent, they're spelunkable, if that's a word. But they do exist, and I have no doubt that, I believe these beings are a people. They have a voice, they have a culture. I mean, I've listened to them interact, not only with me in my recordings, my encounters, I've recorded a few of those, but the conversations, if you will, that I get from remote recording are pretty profound. So there are people, they have a culture. I've heard them singing.
In your opinion, do you think that caves or underground caverns in Kentucky could provide a hiding place for something like Sasquatch?
Yes, I know around here I have the most sightings, and there's a lot of caves and old clay mines around here. So, and I think they stay here all year round because there's sightings in February and then in the summers too. So it's not like they're leaving for winter and stuff.
They could, but a temporary shelter or hiding place. And the reason I say that, I have over 700 documented reports in Kentucky in 3 decades. I only have one of them seen at the mouth of a cave. So what I believe, they're too smart to play house in a cave. There's too many hikers, splunkers. They're gonna walk up on them and they could get trapped. So they keep moving, from my belief, and they sleep wherever they can sleep. So I don't really believe there's a connection with that. Now during inclement weather, yeah, they could take shelter there, but they won't stay long, is my belief.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, he could probably talk about the mines, whereas
so, yes.
caves are more for me. Yeah, definitely, we've got some cave systems around here. They average at length maybe 1.125 miles, but some of these caves are huge. One of the caves at Carter Caves supposedly has the largest cave room of any caves in this county. So yeah, definitely, there'd be great places. And matter of fact, there've been a blog or two on the internet that speaks of a cave system over around Grayson Lake, Grayson Reservoir, that they suspect Bigfoots are using for shelter and whatnot. So yeah, it's highly possible.
And speaking of the mines, what kind of mines again?
It was clay mines. They shut down in 1961 roughly, and there was quite a few of them. And there's, well, here and what we call Aden, it's over by Aden Tunnel and things. They was actually on both sides of the creek all through this area, and it was a big operation in the 40s and 50s.
They mine the clay for fire brick. We used to have fire brick factories around here.
You also had
pretty big
numerous brickyards through here that would process that clay. And there's only one now, and y'all passed it up our ground. It's a little one.
Here's a piece of petrified tree right here. And here's the tree growing right above you. You can see it. If you explore the caves around here, even on this farm, they were dwelling places for ancient peoples before. They lived there. There are still fire marks on the walls. They provide good cover. They're a pretty consistent temperature year round. Typically found near water sources or in the middle of the woods, so you've got pretty much everything that you have need of there. A place to hide, a place to feel safe, a place to eat, a place to lay down, a place that you can inhabit pretty much year round that's going to stay pretty consistent for you. Well, let me tell you about my experience here with this backyard Sasquatch. If you want to call this place this, I guess you could call this backyard, even though we're sitting in the middle of the woods in my yard. I come down here in 21. I had a shoulder surgery, rotator cuff surgery. So I had to sleep in the front room in a recliner because I couldn't lay down. And as I was in there sleeping in the chair that I showed you, window right next to me, I hear a rock. And you know how when you can hear something, you can identify what it is. It's an amazing kind of a picture that your mind creates. I heard the rock hit the window and then it falls into the gravel, and I could hear the rock fall into the gravel and the noise that it made. At that point in time, I had a Presa Canario dog, which is a very aggressive guard dog, big dog, well over 100 pounds. Begins to act very aggressive and then turns very afraid and crawls up in my lap. Likes to kill me, but he crawls up in my lap. So he and I both didn't really want to look out the window. And so the next night, it was such an odd thing. It was a very calm night. There was no wind and there's no trees around my house. I pushed them all out when this was all forest here. And the next night I asked my wife, won't you come out here and sit with me and let's sleep out here and see what if this happens again. Sure enough, at almost the same time, again, a rock hits the window, lands in the gravel. The dog wakes up, the dog gets aggressive, the dog wants to hide and climb in my lap. The other story that I would tell you, the backyard stuff, we've heard several slaps on the house. Things hitting the house. When my dad passed away in 21, my dad always wore turkey feathers in his hat. We found a matching feather to one of the ones that was missing, and it was embedded in the gravel at the foot of my steps, roughly 4 inches deep, pushed straight down in the gravel, where when I exited my house and come to the bottom step, it was right there sticking perfectly straight up in the air. You couldn't have put a level on it and made it any more straight and pushed down into the gravel. And this was left here by the tribal pole for us. This is our tribal colors. And this was also what was left for us at the bottom of my steps. This was pushed down, one just like this, about 4 inches down into the gravel, sticking straight up at the bottom of my steps when my dad had passed away. So we'll insert this right here and kind of we'll see if it hangs around for just a little while.
I think a lot of the stories that we all grew up with historically we relate to haunted things have a relationship with Bigfoot. For instance, I grew up in Central Ohio, and part of the Columbus Metro Park system was Clear Creek Park down near Old Man's Cave. And I can remember as a teenager, there was a hanging bridge that went over Clear Creek, and it was believed that sometimes when you were there that there was a ghost named Mary, and she would throw rocks and sometimes make loud noises when you got near her. Of course, now, years later, we recognize that as typical Bigfoot behavior, and that's a great place for a Bigfoot. So I think that many of the legends that we see across Ohio and other states, you know, have some type of maybe a root or a background that might be Bigfoot related. You know, it's well known Bigfoot are commonly seen around graveyards. I look at graveyards similar to I would a right-of-way. Is there anything that there's an edge, and anytime you have an edge, it attracts wildlife. There's varying different plants, things like that, and I think that that's probably why things like that are getting seen, and people are saying there's a ghost.
Yeah, I've taken a lot of reports clear up in Ashtabula County, which is clear up on the lake. Hocking Hills area, where Old Man's Cave is, there are several reports. A lot of people are renting cabins and chalets and cottages, and they're putting stuff out. They're putting food out and stuff, and I think these creatures are starting to get a habit of coming around and taking these offerings, because I've had emails from people saying they've heard noises at night and they've smelled very stinky odors, and they've heard something walking on the deck or back porch of the cabin, and a lot of them are, you know, exchanging information on social media about a certain cabin where they go out and they'll fry bacon, and they'll leave food out. You know, they're coaxing these creatures to get in closer to take their offering, but I think you want to be very careful before you start a pattern like that.
I'm Michael Kain, and we are in the heart of Hocking County. This property is 750 acres. It's almost entirely wooded. It is has a long history. I don't know if you guys realize, but when you turned on my road, there was an Indian mound you drove by. So it's got ancient culture, has been in this area for thousands of years. The Rock House is a very popular attraction. It's 3 minutes from the cabin. So, and that's a giant cave like that the indigenous people used to live in. The terrain here is roughly, I think the cabin's sitting at 800 feet in elevation, and it goes up to 1,200 feet up at the tops there. And we're kind of in a ravine right now, and I own what's called a hollow within this, between two ravines, which I call, and then the only neighbors you kind of have are about 60 acres apart. And I think in 10 miles, there's 10 people that live on this road. And when you live in an area like this long enough, you get a sense of the ambience of what it feels like when it's normal and what it feels like when something's off. And a lot of stuff started in the beginning. I'd hear like little girls giggling out in the woods, which this cabin sits on 750 acres. So it's not near any public hiking trails or anything. So it's always odd when you hear what you think are humans out in the woods. Then my cabin started getting hit with rocks, sticks, my bedroom window right up there on the second floor, we get tapping on it. When it's summer in this area and the foliage is full up, it seems like the activity follows that. And it's strange, and I hear a lot of knocks out in the woods. I was sitting out here by the bonfire one night, and it's really dark out here, and you can't see into the woods very, very close. I was hearing movement, and to the point where I just had this little fire, and I'm hearing this movement, and I thought to myself, well, there's bears in Hocking County too. So I went inside, I grabbed my firearm, I hid it, but I just put it hidden in my pants and went back and sat down. And the next thing, a rock from in the woods comes and hits right beside me where I'm sitting by the bonfire. So I'm like, okay, that's very unusual. And as I'm listening, a bunch of rocks hit this portion of my cabin right here. At that point, I think, okay, I'm kind of nervous to be sitting out so close into the tree line. I moved to the deck on the other side of the cabin, and I'm sitting on the deck, and I start getting little rocks hitting the cabin, hitting the deck, hitting this portion of the cabin. And I can feel at a certain point, I'm just sitting out there, and I can feel the presence of something. I don't know how to explain it, except you feel it's a powerful emotion. You feel like someone's staring through the back of your skull. And I thought, I'm just gonna sit here. And I put my hands, and I'm in the dark, and I just sit down like this. I just feel this presence behind me. And the next thing I know, down in my pond, I hear, it sounds like there's people swimming in my pond. And I'm like, man, what's going on here? I just sat there. I just waited as long as I could. And finally it went away, and everything kind of calmed down. The next morning, I look out my pond, and there's a sapling in my pond. As I go down to inspect, something had taken this sapling, and all the fish lay their eggs around the edge of the pond, and it was taking an entire sapling, twisting it like this, and collecting all those eggs on the branches. And there was like a 15-inch print and a small print beside the lake. So I'm like, okay, that's 3 right there. And it just felt like whatever was behind me was there to make sure that I didn't move, and the other 2 getting something to eat out of the pond. I mean, that's the only explanation I can think of. One time, I was sitting on my deck. It's pitch dark, and I'd been out there a long time because I like to sit out and stare at the stars here. I'm sitting out there, and I hear the tree knock across the pond. So I kind of look at my phone, and I'm like, I waited for about 8 minutes, and I just did my own little mouth pop, you know. And something came down this hill. It sounded like an elephant down the hill and hits the top of my carport, and it sounds like a gunshot. Like immediately telling that was not us. That's, you don't do that. And I've never done it since. That was about the same time where after that happened, I'm frozen. And I finally collect myself. Now I think, okay, I'm going to go into the cabin, but I'm going to just do a lot of stuff in there. I got lights turned on, turn off lights. And while I'm doing that, I grab a recorder. And I take this recorder, I turn it on, and I just put it in my screened in room here. Go back in, do a bunch of stuff, turn all the lights off, and I go to bed. And I have the window open up there, and I can hear knocks and stuff, and I'm just laying there. I finally go to sleep. I get up 5:30 in the morning, get up, and I go out, and before I leave, I grab my recorder. And it's very interesting. You hear me going in and out of the house. You hear me first shut the cabin door. You hear a knock. As soon as I go in the cabin, you hear a knock out in the woods. And then within, I would say, an hour, you hear something step on the deck. You hear my screen door. The recorder's in my screened-in room. You hear my screen door open. You hear something go across there. It kicks my recorder. Kicks my recorder across the floor, and it just sounds like it sits down. And then I hear I have this little antique door with a little cheap latch, like the old-time latch. You can hear it shaking, like trying to open the door to my cabin. Now, on the recording, you can hear my alarm go off. As soon as my alarm goes off, this thing gets up, and you hear the screen door shut, walk off the deck, and you hear, just sticks and stuff breaking. That was 6 hours that something was in there. And I had no idea. So I didn't listen to this till later that night. That changed everything about how I live out here. This used to be really dark. I put in solar lights and motion lights because I get ready for work, I'm grabbing my coffee. I've never in a million years thought something could be in that screened-in porch. But obviously something was. I've had eye shine here. A really strange experience happened right up this hill here. And I came out and I had a headlight on, like a headlight. At times I do some night hiking here, but I came out of my cabin and just as my headlamp was on, as soon as I hit up the ravine there, these eyes look like this. They look like oval shape, about this far apart and staring at me. And I'm just looking, and you can see because of the eye shine, it looks away, looks back at me, blinks, looks away again, and something just moves off. And the next day I went out there, the only thing that's there, it was standing behind a tree. And it's probably a good 6 to 7 foot pine tree. And it was above that. And so that was definitely some strange eye shine. And it was reflecting back red. As recent as July 4th of this year was the last time something happened. Pretty incredible here. And I got some thermal footage from that. I got some live footage of stuff hitting my cabin. On the 4th, I didn't go anywhere. I stayed here. A lot of time, I live here by myself. And a lot of times I'm here, no visitors. And I was out working I have a Harley, and I was out working on my Harley. And I noticed earlier that night when I was working on my Harley, I was hearing sticks breaking out in the woods again. I don't know how to tell you, it's like a sense. Because trees fall out here all the time, sticks, you hear all that stuff, but at times it's the way I think you hear the things moving. And a couple times I heard like a pop, or I heard something, and I didn't think anything about it. I continued to work on my motorcycle, got it running, I'm revving it up, and I put it in. I go back into the cabin for a while and ended up coming back out on my deck, and almost immediately when I came out on my deck, something hits. Now it's pitch dark out there, and something hits really close by to me, and I'm looking around. I'm like, well, that could be anything. It could be a nut, whatever. I move over, and I'm actually just out there looking around, and it does it again. So as I move around the deck, it's like whatever's it's hitting right beside me. And then, it sounds like a gunshot out there. And that's why I'm like, I need to start recording this, nervous. But I went out there, and it was doing this like every 10 minutes, either something little or something big. And I was, at that point, pretty nervous. So I went into my screen porch area, and I just thought, I'll just sit in here and listen. That got me nervous enough that I didn't stay outside too much longer. I went in and I turned off all the lights, and I have a really good thermal now. And I locked the doors, and I went upstairs facing the front, and I just slid open the window. I already had my thermal on. Started looking out the window from upstairs, and I catch a thermal hit on the top side of my carport. My carport's like 10 feet tall. And as I get the thermal hit there, something pretty loud hits right above my head. Scares me, I'm cussing. I roll back into the room, collect myself again, I go back out, that's gone. And I pan around, and there's another big thermal hit.
Hey!
At a certain point, and it ends up disappearing. And then it's every 10 minutes to like 3 in the morning, stuff hitting the cabin. I end up laying in bed, I'm just listening, and sometimes it'd be a little dink, other times it'd be boom. And this is going on almost all night. It was pretty wild.
Caves offer a very specific environment with stable temperatures and protection from the elements, making them attractive to a range of living creatures. Beyond the obvious need for shelter, caves are ideal for animals that hibernate, providing constant temperature and seclusion from predators. Along those same lines, caves can function as places in which to safely give birth and raise young. And long-term life in a cave system may lead to sensory adaptations, such as enhanced hearing or smell. It isn't too difficult to imagine how something the size of Bigfoot would benefit from any or all of these features.
Their behaviors for shelter and cover and concealment would play well into the fact that they do in fact use caves. They use it probably anything that they can, although they seem impervious to rain. Many of my encounters have happened in the rain. I think they like to move in the rain. There again on that cover and concealment sort of thought. They know when, and they function very well in inclement conditions. Yeah, the cave thing, yeah, they're real. I'm certain they use them. I don't have any personal experience as having found evidence of their habitation within caves, because we don't have a lot in here, not in the Lower Peninsula.
Do you think that Sasquatch use caves for shelter?
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah, because what we found is they make their own burrows. So yeah, if there's no caves around, they're gonna either make themselves makeshift shelters or burrow into the side of riverbanks. We've been up and down some rivers, and you find, one thing about Sasquatch is they move a lot. They don't really want to be seen. They want to move at dark. In fact, they get kind of upset if they are found out, and so they have multiple locations, and they'll rotate those locations, and they do a really good job of covering their tracks. So they might spend the night at location A, and they might burrow in the side of a river, and then the next day they're going to cover that up, cover their footprints, and move to the next location. So yeah, they do what they have to do.
But yeah, if I were any old animal, in the elements, I would want to be somewhere that was protected from the wind or the cold. I mean, it just stands to reason. I will say that in Michigan, when winter comes, you don't get the howls. You don't get a lot of reports. They just don't come because it would be hard to live out there. What do you eat? Where do you get fresh water? It's just cold. So you'd have to be in areas like with cedar swamps or something like that, which will be dramatically warmer than the rest of the area, but even then it gets pretty darn cold in Michigan. So I would think that if I were a creature, I would look for some place to hole up, or I would migrate, just like people do, go where it's warm.
I think the cave system and the clay mines around here they're out in the middle of nowhere. So they're gonna go undetected around those places. They're gonna be able to go and get their food, their water sources and stuff, and they're not gonna be around people. They're out in the woods.
Caves would provide temporary shelter for a Bigfoot. Like I said, I don't think they're gonna stay there very long. We don't have a lot of evidence of that. They're too smart for that. We have reports of them sleeping under downed trees with leaves on them, and then they move. I believe within their territory, they sleep and move quite often. They never set up shop, they never play house. It's too risky, we're gonna walk up on them. And that's why we don't find a lot of elaborate Bigfoot houses, if you will. Most of their shelters are territorial markers, just to mark their territory, and that's what they use them for. But to live in one, they typically just sleep wherever they can.
I'd say for a lot of these remoteness, if you'll take this area here, for instance, a lot of cliffs and all, principally limestone and sandstone, it's the remoteness, and also a big creature like a Bigfoot, caves have a year-round temperature in the upper 50s. So a big creature like that during this time of the year, man, they'll get super warm. Caves would be ideal situations for them to locate in.
The mines would be the same way, of course.
Yeah.
Food sources, shelter, and water, the three main things that any animal is really looking for. A place to be safe, a place to be out of the elements, a place that it can guard, a place that would also provide water nearby, a place where it could have its young, a place where it can eat. And all the caverns in Kentucky, the caverns on this farm, provide all those elements for all the animals that use them to this day. In one expedition that we had here on this farm, we were being paralleled by something, and you could tell it. The group that I was with was on a ridge over here, and it was very dark. We had the red headlamps on, and we were walking along, and as we would walk, it would walk. And it was maybe 20 to 30 yards inside. We were on a logging road, and it was inside the forest 20 or 30 yards in from us. And as we would stop, it would stop. And if you wasn't careful, you would miss the shuffling in the leaves, the and so we would stop and it would stop. So paralleling, definitely. I have a friend that lives nearby here who, her and her brother were in a truck traveling where you stayed, just down from there, and in the tree line stood one of these creatures. And as they drove by it, they seen it, they didn't say anything, and they later on said, okay, did you see what I seen? And yes, they both did. Neither one wanted to think that the other was crazy, so when they went back, the creature had gone. The creature seems to understand how to use a backdrop, how not to stand in the open so that it's highly visible, but how to use a backdrop and blend itself into its environment. The one thing that we've noticed here is definitely the tree knocks. The location of other creatures, the whooping sounds. I've heard songbirds at 2 o'clock in the morning, whistling, and it seems to be nothing more than communication between these creatures to let each other know what each other's doing. They seem to have an understanding that we don't have. So I would say definitely communication.
It's an image that resonates with human beings at a very deep level. A mysterious monster emerging from a shadowy lair. There's a reason it's been a mainstay of literature for thousands of years. But while the idea haunts our collective nightmares and seems like a plausible, logical solution to the problem of where a Sasquatch might live, there may be some practical problems with the reality of cave dwelling as a habitat choice for mystery hominids, especially in the central Great Lakes region of the United States.
What are some problems with the idea of Bigfoot using caves as a space to be, period?
Humans, we know where every cave is almost. There are some caves that are hard to get to, and those would be safer. Like even here in this property here, he's got a cave now he has not been in, so we're anxious to go check that out. So I just think they're too smart to do that, from my belief.
We know, according to archaeology, according to anthropology, that ancient man has always used caves. It's an instant home, it's an instant refuge. It can be a place of safety, a place of hiding. It can provide all the things that we talked about before. It absolutely is the best place for any kind of creature to use to call it home.
Problems for the Bigfoot?
Well, just problems with that idea in general.
Oh, No, I wouldn't see. If I was a creature in this area, that would be the remoteness of some of these caves would be an ideal situation, and I would utilize a shelter like that.
Researchers come across all manner of accounts when dealing with Bigfoot sightings. The ones that take place in the immediate vicinity of caves invite us to ponder the connections. Could it be coincidence that the creature is perceived in proximity to a cave? Did it use the cave momentarily, driven by circumstance? Or is it possible that the cave is utilized as either a way station or a more permanent shelter?
I know that there's a lot of sightings at Carter Caves, and then there's another set of caves called Tart Kill Caves, and I have some sightings there as well. Now, I don't have sightings right at cave entrances, but, you know, in close proximity to that. And also, once I was back in the woods and I heard rock sliding on rock, like something was moving something in front of a cave, like, you know, like a hiding spot or something.
Yeah, they were camping in a cave. It was near the Red River Gorge, where we are now. And I think he got up to go relieve himself. And there was a Bigfoot standing just outside the mouth of the cave. And if I recall, he mentioned the Bigfoot was kind of antsy, nervous, kind of pacing, almost like it wanted to get in the cave, was my impression of that. There was, I believe, a full moon, so he got a good look at it. No evidence of the Bigfoot living in the cave. There were no tracks in the cave, no bones in the cave. So we don't know why the Bigfoot wanted to get in there, but this gentleman was camping in the cave.
My neighbor doesn't live very far from the Carter Cave State Park, so there's access to plenty of areas in there that may have another structure that they could possibly use is rock shelters. Rock shelters around here have a lot of waterfalls that come over in front of that rock shelter, so source of water and protection from the elements. That's the only thing I could relate to as far as reports being close enough to caves that they say, well, maybe they're using, you know, the cave system.
Around here?
Yeah.
Yes, around here I've heard many people talk about caves where they've been seen at along the Blackwater River, along going up next to the Licking River, around the Cave Run area. All these areas have associated with them, typically around these waterways, you have a lot of cliff ledges around in this area where people have said that they have seen them at. So typically it's assumed then that they're living in this area and living in these caves.
It's safe to say that Sasquatch is not the only creature that could potentially take advantage of caves for reasons of shelter. All types of discovered animals make regular, long-term use of caves, everything from bats and salamanders to wood rats and black bear. Deer and coyote both are known to use caves as place of temporary refuge. There might also be competition for cave spaces from known animals that should not exist in a given location, at least according to the proclamation of local government officials.
Basically, anywhere that a Bigfoot could live would be the type of area that a bear would live. If a bear can live there, a person can live there. If a person and a bear can live there, then maybe a big old primate could live there as well. So I would think that if we're looking at any kind of a structure, or if we're looking at a cave or something to that effect, if you could run out a bear, then you could probably take that area. I used to do research on like Neanderthals and stuff like that, and their competition for living space with cave bears and things like that. I was always fascinated by that. And it's kind of funny because I have thought about that. What if, let's say a Bigfoot exists and they want that cave and there's a bear in there, how do you get rid of it? Because the last thing you want to do is tangle with an animal that can hurt you. It just makes no sense. And so what can you do to dissuade the bear to not be there so you could be there? I don't know, it's just an interesting theory to think about. So it seems kind of silly to even ponder that, but it's something that I have.
We have bear and we have cougars, although the government will tell you we do not have cougars. So I would say that would be competition for.
Well, suppose there's cougars here, even though most people say they ain't, but they really are. And there's black bears here, and they would compete with food source, and that'd be the two largest ones. And so.
Bear, maybe. We've had recent sightings of a lot of
the bear population is moving up in this area big time. And,
if I was a Bigfoot in this area, a lot of researchers think that their primary food source is deer. We have all kinds of deer in this area, and as well as turkey. But I kind of think I associate Bigfoots with their environment in the woods. They have the coyotes, so coyotes are predators. They go out and make a kill. How nice it would be to go out and follow the coyotes and, hey, look at here. There's nothing going to compete, run the Bigfoot off. He can come in and get the kill, and there you have it. So there's, there seems to be a connection there too, I think.
Also, I found numerous deer cartridges and carcasses in the woods that I don't believe was killed by hunters and things. That had either been partially eaten and the rest of it decayed or whatever. And so, they could be a source of food. As a matter of fact, I believe it would be.
Yeah, these things need a lot of calories, so, yeah.
Definitely the bears. We're getting a bigger bear population in this area. Pretty much we're starting to see evidence of them nearly every week. When before, 30, 40 years ago, they were rarely seen. But their range seems to be expanding into this area. Also, bobcats. Also, there are reports of the mountain lions we were talking about before. I've seen big cat prints here. So there's lots of larger predator animals, the coyotes especially, that love to use the caverns to call home.
Bears. We have black bears here. And it's funny, we were talking about that, about the population of Bigfoot. And I know there's some scientists like Dr. Meldrum who speculate for every 200 bear, there's one Bigfoot, roughly. I think it's a lower ratio than that. I'm sorry, that would be a higher ratio. I think there's actually more Bigfoot than that. There's 1,000 Bigfoot in Kentucky. There's 1,000 black bear in Kentucky estimated. And if you did that ratio, that's not very many Bigfoot. I believe there's more Bigfoot in Kentucky. So I think the ratio is probably more like, believe it or not, anywhere from 50 to 100 black bear to one Bigfoot.
Well, here in Michigan, there is no competition, but they're the alpha predator. We do have black bears, and we're surging with cougars as well. But yeah, I don't see them, the black bears are smaller in Michigan. I don't see them being any kind of competition. And if they are, they're for food and deer, and the Sasquatch will chase them off, so.
Caves occur naturally in many different forms and types of rock. They are to be discovered in the course of normal wilderness wandering. But there are also stories passed down of Sasquatch using abandoned structures or barns in an effort to find shelter. It's fascinating to consider that mystery primates may occasionally benefit from the handiwork of humanity, if only indirectly.
There was a Detroit sighting, and someone said they saw a long hairy arm out of a window of an abandoned house. And Detroit has gone through a lot historically from an economic perspective. There are a lot of homes and entire neighborhoods that are just neglected by or damaged by neglect. And a certain type of people, I'm sure, take advantage of that. Now, I've recorded vocalizations around Ann Arbor, Southfield. I mean, these are bona fide, you know, I've established the verifying vocal elements, identified these, explored the audio, and it's these cryptid beings. Now, there could be different kind of cryptid beings, but they have this low, furtive, harmonic resonant sort of speech that I've recorded in depth, both in Ann Arbor and in Southfield. And they're thriving, even around the metro areas. I once hired Cliff Bergman. He said that if the Finding Bigfoot series had gone on an extra season, they were going to select Detroit as the #1 spot. It's like a suburban, urban sort of Sasquatch. Detroit has the Huron River system, the Clinton, and the Rouge. Those are 3 really extensive and significant systems all around the Detroit area, and these beings live within our watersheds, and the offshoots of them, and the drainage ditches. I've actually found evidence suggesting that they live subterraneously, whatever the word is, under Mount Clemens, which is along the Clinton River. And yeah, I believe they live in access. Talk about caves. Okay, since Lower Michigan doesn't have a lot of caves, we do have drainage systems, the storm drains under our cities. I have reason to believe one of those is occupied in the Mount Clemens area.
Any kind of living creature needs to find a couple of things in order to survive. They have to find food, water, shelter, things like that. Not necessarily in that order, but shelter could be something like an old barn. Shelter could be and you'll see this a lot. You'll see old mobile homes just in the forests, because people will have them out there. They will use them as hunting lodges, and they also double. You just roll the window down and it becomes a hunting blind. But those can be used by any animal in order to, or person for that matter, in order to seek shelter. In Romulus, Michigan, which is really close to Detroit Metro Airport, there was a woman who I spoke with, and she had an old barn in her backyard. Now, Romulus, you think right outside of Detroit, it's going to be just building upon building and road, but once you get to the southern part of the airport, it's all woods. And then there are metro parks there also. So she abuts one of the metro parks. And she started to hear these weird noises coming from her barn. And she described them to me as a deaf Amish person. And I'm like, I don't even know what a deaf Amish person sounds like. And so she was trying to mimic it for me, and I'm like, I really don't understand this. And she said, fine, I'll get a recording of it, and she did. And what you could hear is a cross between a howl and a moan, and it's very odd. But whatever it was, she thought was living in her barn. And it was taking like old straw and stuff, and making like little nests and things like that. And so that's a possibility. I also know that we're gonna have to edit this out. I can't remember where it is. There was another place that was just south of Traverse City, where an old mobile home, or actually no, I take it back. It was an old trailer that was kind of like a camper is the word I'm looking for. We're gonna start that all over again. Wow, imagine me as a teacher. I'm just gonna redo this, kids. In an area that was south of Traverse City, about half an hour south of Traverse City, which means it's about a half an hour north of my property, there was a camper that was out there that was derelict. A mountain biker had stopped near this camper in order to get a drink of water or something like that. And they heard something in the camper. They turned around and looked in the window, and they saw what they said was a Bigfoot looking back out at them, which would have been disconcerting. So The guy gets back on his mountain bike to go away, and the creature then got out and moved toward him, and scared the heck out of him, and that's the last that he saw. But he said it was a large, brownish, darkish creature that was on 2 legs. So it may have been hanging out in there or something like that.
I knew a lady that lived near Grayson that had some horses, and she could have had maybe a mountain lion or something. Anyway, she couldn't get her horses to go back in the barn, and I just immediately told her, I said, "You sure it's not Bigfoot activity?" Because she did have a Bigfoot sighting prior to this, and so she was afraid to go to the barn, but the way she was describing the encounter and all, it sounded like something large was in that barn. That could have been an incident where maybe Bigfoot used a structure, but like that, but I've really not. Most of the sightings around here, if you're lucky, you may drive down a road and one go across the road in front of you, or you'll see one standing at the edge of the woods or by a tree or something like that. They've even been spotted going across the Interstate 64 early in the morning and things. But us, I would more than likely think that I would probably see one out in the woods the way we go hunt the things.
I do know a guy that had trouble getting his horse in the barn one evening. It wasn't, of course, it was occupied barn he used all the time, and his horse didn't want to go in the barn. He wanted to stay out in the lot and run around, and he was skittish. But then he said once they got him in the barn, he stuck his head out the so-called cut window, and he was looking up in the woods like there's what was. He know that's where there's something up there. It was definitely something that this guy said it was something he wasn't used to. He said that could be a bear, but it's something that horse, it wasn't a deer, he said. It's something that horse wasn't used to having any contact with.
Of course, you know, if someone called us and there was a report they thought they had something in the barn, you know, what we're all about is trying to go out and investigate these things. And I would, you know, I'd have to look, my first thing would be looking for some kind of evidence, footprints, you name it, and go from there. But people could misinterpret some of the things that are happening, so hopefully they maybe would contact us so maybe we could help them maybe determine what really was occurring. You know.
In this area, I heard one, probably about a person that lives about an hour northeast of here, where one was in an old abandoned barn on his property, and he thought that it was using it as a place to stay.
Quite often, abandoned homes. I got one down by McKee, Kentucky. Some boys were playing with BB guns, came up on this abandoned cabin, and there was a Bigfoot in the cabin, and they ran. I get that a lot. So yeah, they're opportunistic. They'll take any place they can, but again, I think they keep moving.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. That's the bigger thing here in Michigan, is old barns, old houses. Up by Cass City, they were hiding out in a barn for a long time. One of the clans was by the Cass River. And yeah, so there's one instance. And then, yeah, just another instance. So many instances where people find them in their barns, so they might be looking for a place to stay overnight or whatever.
From a natural perspective, caves have served many purposes for animals and people alike. For human beings, caves have become makeshift homes, burial sites, places of worship, and locations of scientific discovery. We've also used caves to talk about birth and rebirth, hidden knowledge, and passage to the underworld. And of course, caves are inherently dangerous, concealing mysteries from all but the most brave or foolhardy among us. Whether or not one of those mysteries is the presence of Sasquatch remains to be seen. It's enticing to hope that one day the truth will come to light.